The satisfaction of being able to do something you once thought was beyond your skill set is, in my opinion, one of the greatest riches that life can offer. In this rapidly changing world, it will be those who have an efficient method for learning new skills that will be the best off, whether that's learning how to use a new software at work, a new marketing idea, or a new programming language. Lifelong learners will be those at the biggest advantages in so many walks of life. Hey guys, how's it going? Today I want to talk to you about learning, and over the next 10 minutes or so I'm going to take you through how I break down learning new skills and actually take you through an example of me learning a new skill, which is these really cool sort of flat illustrations that you've probably seen everywhere all over the web. I'll leave the timestamps here so you can jump in and out if you want, although because we're going to be dissecting learning in a sequence of steps, I'd probably recommend that you follow the video all the way through. So the first thing that I'd recommend that you do is pick a really narrow goal with your learning. I want to be able to code, or I want to be able to draw, or I want to be able to speak Spanish. These are all great visions to have, but if you have this as your first goal, you're going to find yourself quickly overwhelmed. The task is going to seem so gargantuan that once you start it and you don't see as much progress as you would like, you're going to become quite quickly demotivated. So what I'd recommend that you do is just pick something really narrow that's quite achievable that you could then use as a stepping stone towards your bigger vision. So rather than I want to be able to code, maybe you just want to be able to build a basic website that I can show my CV on. Likewise, if you're trying to learn a language, what you might want to do is say, I want to be able to have a conversation where I can order a meal at a restaurant. By doing this, you're going to find it a lot easier to motivate yourself, and then as soon as you've reached that one goal, you can just create more and more and more, and eventually you'll be well on your way to learning the skill. So in my case, I just set my goal as I want to be able to draw a flat drawing of a person completing an action. I wasn't going to get distracted by complex 3D perspectives or different colorings or backgrounds. I just wanted to produce a very simple drawing of this kind of illustration style. The next step that I'd advise is that you go out there and find a master that you can copy. Now this is probably going to piss off all the purists out there who think that creative inspiration is something divine that should come from within. I'm not necessarily of that school of thought. I think everyone's got to start somewhere, and until you've got the basic skill set to be able to execute on the skill itself, there's no point getting too lofty about your ideals of what you're going to be able to create, and just copying is a really good place to start. Now we're lucky enough to live in the internet age where there's people who are producing really great work and it's really accessible. I found an artist who did the illustrations that I like and was lucky enough to find that they'd actually done a Skillshare course breaking down their process step by step. So I just followed that all the way through. If you can't find somebody who's put up a step-by-step process of how they go around doing what they're doing, you can always just deconstruct their work, although it is going to be harder. One other thing to note here is that if there's somebody that you really admire, it's actually worth trying to understand the why behind what they're creating. So maybe there's a writer that you really like and they've got a certain worldview that they're trying to get across through with their art. Likewise, there might be a musician, what are they trying to portray through their music that is making it so effective? And if you can really understand this why as to why somebody is putting their art out there in the copying part of learning, I think it's going to really help bring your imitations to life a bit better. The next thing that I find helpful to do is to actually break down the skill into a number of little sub-skills. So taking the example of drawing for me, I broke it down into sketching, colouring, shading, and also just navigating the tool, which was Procreate, that I was going to be using to perform the work. And I find this helpful for a couple of reasons. Firstly, by breaking a skill down into its individual sort of sub-skills, you can actually focus on these skills individually, so it's going to help you to identify any weaknesses in your work, and this becomes important as we move on to the later stages. Secondly, by breaking it down, it also helps, just like when we set a really narrow goal at the start, to make the task look a little bit more manageable. If you can look at something like creating a YouTube video and see that, okay, it's made up of script writing, it's made up of filming, editing, marketing, these different kinds of skills, it just makes the whole thing a bit more approachable. Also, thinking in this way, it really just increases your aptitude for something that I think is really important, which is first principles thinking. And this is just generally the mental model, which is where you take something and break it down into its fundamental truths. So yeah, double win there. The next thing that we absolutely need to be doing is regularly reviewing and critiquing our work, and this can be a bit difficult. The idea here is that we're creating a feedback loop so that we're monitoring the output that we're creating, using that information to then improve the input next time round. It's a very simple concept, but it's so powerful and so important if you actually want to improve the skill that you're working on. So how I do this is I set up a portfolio board in a tool that I like to use called Notion, and then after each piece of work I then just take a few minutes to look at it, to review it, and then I'll just write down everything that I hate about it. And you've got to be hard on yourself here, I think, because otherwise you're not going to identify where your weaknesses are and you're not going to grow. And once you get into this mindset of critiquing things, it gets really easy, trust me. Like, you're actually going to have the opposite problem where you can't see the good in what you're doing. Now, once you've got that massive list of things that you really don't like with your work, the next and equally important thing is to just take one or two things and try and work on them with the next piece of art that you create. It's really important here that you don't get massively overwhelmed with a list of 20 things, because obviously no human being can improve 20 things about their work. But if you just pick one or two things and try and work on them next time round, it's going to add up if you keep doing that again and again and again. Now, with my first completed work, which you can see here, where do we begin? It's just so completely awful compared to the art that I was trying to imitate by Jerome. But as you can see, the probably most glaring, obvious flaw in it is the proportions are all wrong. One of the arms is just really ridiculously short. So all I did after doing that piece of work was said, right, I'm going to just purely focus on sketching out proportions, because I absolutely suck at them and they're really important to get a lifelike looking drawing. And then I actually made this into a series of sketches that I drew for some family friends, so managing to turn the exercise itself into something that's valuable. And I think this is just the habit that you want to get into. After you finish a piece of work, bring the biggest flaw out of that piece of work and really try and put an emphasis on it in your next piece. Now, I'm actually reluctant to call the next step a step, because it's, in my experience anyway, just something that naturally arises through the learning process that we've just talked about, and that is injecting your own creativity. Now, I don't know where creativity comes from. I think everyone has their own idea about that. But I think one thing is for sure is that once you become more proficient at the basics of the skill, so if that's taking my drawing as an example, being able to do the sketching, being able to do the colouring, you then just find it a bit easier to actually express what you want to do. I think one thing that can maybe help with being a bit more creative is to just try and have a bit of a higher purpose in mind about what it is you want to create. So rather than thinking about, creating a website or creating a drawing, maybe trying to think, what is it that you really want to express? Do you want to make something that is so simple and easy to use that people are going to be like, wow, that was just the simplest and most delightful platform ever? Or do you want to maybe show something about the human condition through your art? These are all things that are at a slightly higher level, like a bit more of a why than a what of what you're creating, that I think really help with getting those sort of creative juices flowing. Now, in my case, I took some time off and went to stay with my parents and just found myself really inspired living where they were and delighting in their garden, I suppose, and just really wanted to show the sort of vibrant colours of that place and that's why I started to do this sort of study of the plants in the garden. And it was taking the skills that I'd learned from Jerome Vogel's course, and all really the same techniques, but just applying them in a slightly different way. Now, whether you'd call this creative or not, I'm not sure, but it certainly is just a bit different to the imitations that I was doing before. So yeah, that's basically the main steps, I think, to learning. I hope you found that somewhat helpful. When we come to learning new things, it can quite easily become overwhelming. So that's why I think that starting off with a really small target, realizing that copying is okay and actually seeking out to find a master that you can copy, then breaking down their process into its really fundamental skills, before then starting to create your own work and making sure you're really diligent with that review process of critiquing what could be better and then trying to incorporate that into your next piece of work. I think, if you go through these steps, you can't really go far wrong with learning, and hopefully the creative aspect of whatever it is you're trying to do will eventually shine through. Thanks a lot for sticking around to the end of the video. If you like this video, you can press subscribe. I'm going to be releasing more videos about learning in the future. It's a topic that I think really interests me, and I just think is so important for people as we move into a faster and faster changing world, it seems. So yeah, have a great day. Thanks a lot.